Hey everybody, welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid and whatever this channel is about. Today it's about the fact that 43 of you are going to unsubscribe from this channel after you hear this video. How do I know this? Because I do the numbers. Listen, you can run your business or your business will run you. And I know the math of how things work. I know what percentage of you are not going to like this message and are therefore going to unsubscribe after you probably call me a few things in the comment section. It'll never be seen by the light of day because they'll be held for review. They're so mean and I won't read them. I'll just ban you. But you already unsubscribed anyway, so it doesn't matter. Right? So what is this thing? Well, you heard the saying, truth is the new hate speech. You've probably heard that. And you know who says that a lot? Hypocrites who doesn't think it applies to them. Yeah, when it's a damning, hateful truth towards someone else, or particularly people in a group in which they don't belong, but they don't mind saying truth's the new hate speech, then, well, I'm going to speak a certain truth today. You're not going to like the fact that this truth applies to you, 43 of you at least, and you're going to be gone. So what is Crazy Lake talking about today? Well, I'm talking about a pretty big day. Couple of amazing things today happened. A couple of amazing women accomplished something amazing. One did it today, and one has been doing it for more than a year, going on 2 years. And I tell you, you talk about me being really awestruck and impressed by the second woman. And this, when I tell you what she did, 43 of you are going to unsubscribe because I'm going to tell you how she did it. That's the truth you don't want to hear. So woman number one, my beautiful bride dearly, aka Giggly Girl, she passed her driver's license test today. Not the driving part, the written part. And most of you probably had no clue that, or maybe many of you did have an idea that she didn't drive. It's never been anything to do with me. I've always been, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't. And for her, it's never really mattered. And the reason is because we're just always together anyway. And that is by choice. And it's not in any sort of unhealthy codependent way. It's in a, we love each other so much, we want to be with each other every waking hour of the day type thing. She goes out with her friends sometimes, and I go out with mine sometimes. And of course, there's been times this wasn't the case. Like for 6 months when I had that job I hated that made me miserable there at the U.S. Postal Service, delivering mail in Charlottesville for 6 months. One of the things I hated most about that job, aside from being totally overworked, going 17 days at a time without a day off, working 12 hours plus a day, coming back at 10 o'clock at night sometimes, making your last mail delivery at 10 p.m., because some supervisor scanned that all these packages had already been delivered to keep their numbers right so they could get that Amazon contract renewed, which ended up not being renewed because Amazon knew what they were doing anyway. Wow, surprise, surprise. The world's largest corporation by marketable capitalization is able to see how a government entity cooks books. No brainer there, right? So anyway, during that time, my point of that little rant was that there would be, I barely saw her, because I was working so much. There would be times when I left to go to work for that job, my kid would still be asleep. It was so early. And when I got home, it was so late at night, he was already in bed. So sometimes a couple days would pass, I wouldn't see my son, even though we were still living in the same house. Fortunately, I was able to make other things work out, namely this YouTube channel and my writing career, to where I could leave that terrible situation and not look back. And by the way, for those of you who are here and who are not among the 43 people that are going to unsubscribe after hearing this new form of hate speech, because it's a big truth 43 people will not want to hear, thank you. I'm only successful because of you. I don't know what it is. I've had people try to explain it to me as to why so many people keep coming back and watching these videos and why they watch them for so long. If you saw the watch time, I was telling you, I check the numbers, I do the math. You either run your business or your business will run you. If you saw our channel's average watch time compared to the average YouTuber's average watch time, it would blow your mind. The numbers don't make sense. And what in the hell is this channel even about? Nobody even knows. I don't even know, and it's my channel. It's like just typically about whatever the hell I feel like talking about that day. Okay, so anyway, she finally passed the written part. She had to take it 3 times. She failed the first 2 times. And she was getting frustrated with herself. It was a combination of, 1, English is not her primary language. It's her 4th language. She speaks 3 native languages above that, and she speaks 5 languages total. I think that's what it is. Maybe it's her 5th language. I know she speaks 4 of her native, Tagalog, Visayan, and 2 other languages I can't pronounce from southern Mindanao in the Philippines. But she didn't give up. She kept working towards it. She got the study guide, and then after failing it the 2nd time, she actually paid, I think it was $10 for some program you could print off that actually had the actual test questions, possible test questions. They were like, you had to pass the first 10 with 100%. Most of them are road signs. Couldn't miss any road signs. But then, so then if you pass that part, you had, I think, 30 questions. So she got this thing that had like 200 questions, any 30 of which could have been asked on that test. And she studied that thing for the last 2 months relentlessly. And I would help her because one of her big problems, of course, was she's never driven. Okay, English wasn't her primary language, and the language isn't English. She can read, write, and speak English, but big words, like she struggles with words like, there was one today she had on her test, prohibited. You think, well, everybody knows what that is. Well, not if English isn't your primary language. Prohibited means something you're not allowed to do. Well, you could say you're not allowed to do this, but if it's stated as you are prohibited from this, that can confuse somebody who doesn't have a strong English speaking background. In her language, it's delete, D-E-L-I, delete, which means no or not allowed to. Word means multiple uses. Delete is much simpler than prohibited. And she's never driven. So it's a cultural thing. America, and I would say probably Canada, are the only 2 countries where most people have a car, period, anyway. America, more so than Canada, is the only country in the world where everybody has like scrap that, 2 cars per household per driver. I mean, at least where we live, it's like if there's 1 driver, they got 2 cars. If there's 2 drivers, they usually have 3 or 4 cars. 3 drivers, they'll have 4 or 5 cars. And I've asked some of them, why do you do that? You're paying all that extra maintenance if something goes wrong, all the extra gas, extra auto insurance. And they're like, well, what if one breaks down and doesn't work? I say, okay, that one's 6 months old. That one's 12 months old. You did have one that was 3 years old, but after 3 years, you traded it back in, and now that one's 12 months old. Has there ever been a problem with any of them? Well, no, but one never knows. Whatever, to each his own. The rest of the world, most places, they don't even own cars. And I'm not just talking about Asia, where my wife's from, and I'm talking about Europe. Most Europeans use public transportation. Well, whatever. It's just things are done differently. I love America. We're great. Defended this nation in war. I would do it again if I had to. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't be here because there's other places I could be. But this is part of the insanity that I've never understood. I'm looking at a big blue heron up there because, see, sometimes this channel's about the wildlife that just happens to walk in front of me and I have to comment on it, or the stuff that walks in the background behind me that may or may not be wildlife. It's a beautiful blue heron. So anyway, when I was in the Philippines for 6 years, we always took public transportation, tricycles, jeepneys. If we wanted to take an extended trip that was on the island we were on, we'd hire a driver. We'd hire a van for the day. I'm not driving over there. And we had a saying over there, the expats from Western nations, that, yeah, they have driving rules in the Philippines, but they're really more like suggestions. Follow them if you want, but if you do, you're not getting anywhere. The red lights, I would sit there when we lived in Makati City, which is a really nice part of Manila, the 6 months before we came here. We had a 33-story high condo. And I would sit there and just look down into the streets of Manila and just watch traffic. And I would watch how it just continuously flowed in and out at the intersections. And I would think, are the red lights not working? And I'd watch. Sure enough, it'd go from green to red. But everybody who had a red light, they just alternated. That's what it's like. So anyway, you can't do that here. And you certainly can't claim to be able to do that here when you're taking a test or you're not going to pass. So there's all that. The only concern I've ever had, and I continue to have this concern, and it's not about the extra vehicle. Yeah, I'm tightwad. It's because I've been third world poor before, and I know what that's like, and so I just don't want to go around pissing money away if I can keep it. You know what I mean? But I've supported her so much with this driving thing. I've told her, hey, you get your license, I'll buy you a Mercedes-Benz. I will. And that's a safe car. Their frames are still made out of steel, not plastic and aluminum foil like so many of the other imports. She's like, well, I don't want that. I want a Toyota 4Runner. I'm like, okay, I'll buy you a Toyota 4Runner, and I will. And I'm going to if that's what she wants. So that's never been a problem. My concern, I really hope she would have gone with the Benzo, because I want a Mercedes-Benz. When I got rid of the Sequoia 2 years ago, I almost bought one of the 450 SUV types because I love those. But it's not practical for our lifestyle and where we live. I needed a pickup, so I got the Dodge Ram 1500 four-wheel drive because I can haul firewood with that. I can ride around in my fields, haul stuff around for fencing and cutting up trees and all this stuff. It's hard to do that with the Mercedes-Benz. I'm not giving up hope. I'm going to really try to talk my wife into getting a Mercedes-Benz, because that means I get to drive it too. But if she wants a 4Runner, we'll go with 4Runner. But here is my concern, and if she had a tank, I would worry about this. People drive like nuts, especially when you get out in rural areas like where we live, especially the folks that have spent their entire lives living here who could drive the roads blindfolded, because it's pretty much the only roads they've ever driven on, except for maybe the once a year they go to Virginia Beach or whatever. Today alone, I ran this afternoon. I missed my run this morning because I took Dearly into the DMV to take this test. So I came back and ran 3 miles at like 2:30 in the afternoon. And I like to run early because that's when I have most of my energy. And I've learned to wait until, 7 to 8 a.m. where I live, it's treacherous to run or bike, because this is when all the people who work in town are going into town. Rush hour. And I'm going to tell you what, this is just how it is. Some of them are so miserable. Maybe I used to work with them at the post office. I don't know. They'll be flying down the road. Speed limit's 45. They all drive 60. Speed limit is 45. The road's narrow, so narrow, they call it a 2-lane road. There's no lines on it. And I don't know how, like, my truck and other trucks don't clip each other's mirrors when we pass on this road. It's how narrow it is, right? But even, like, let's say I'm running. You run with traffic. You run and walk with traffic. Or against traffic. This is a big safety issue. Make sure you know about this, okay? If you're bicycling, which I do a lot too, you cycle with traffic. You stay in the lane, the car's, on the right side of the road. Virginia state law is that cars must give you 3 feet of width when they go around you. Well, if there's another car coming from the other lane, then they must wait. They've got to wait. If you're in a turn and they can't see what's coming, they've got to wait. And I don't understand the difficulty with this, because I live out here too. I pass other cyclists, other runners. It's a very healthy area, very fit area. You'll find people here in their 70s and 80s out here cycling near daily. And if you saw them, you'd call me a liar, because you'd swear they were 50 or 55 years old. Go figure. They take care of themselves. They've aged well. So there's all these people out here. When I come up on a cyclist, and there's a car coming from the other direction, and I don't have 3 feet to get over, well, guess what? I wait. I just wait. And then once the car goes by, I give that guy or that girl, I usually go in the other lane, but I get around them. I do it safely. It's safe for me, it's safe for them, and it's safe for the other vehicle. If I'm in a turn, I wait. But I'm like the only person that lives out here that does that. There are times I have been cycling, and people have come by and have clipped a mirror that I have on the left handlebar of my bike that allows me to see oncoming vehicles behind me. And they've clipped it with their mirror, and there's no one coming from the other lane. They're just not getting over at all. There's been times, this happened last year with a certain neighbor of mine. I'm cycling, I'm going through a curve. Woman comes around on my side of the road because she's scrolling on her phone while she's driving. And I've got nowhere to go. And she looks up at the last minute and gets this OMG look on her face and jerks, you know, the car into her side of the lane. There's times when I'm running. This happened twice today. I was nearly killed today while I'm running against traffic. This is why I don't run during rush hour anymore. There's a couple people that are so miserable. They will be coming. I'll glance back over my shoulder. It might be straight away for 3/4 of a mile. There's clearly nothing coming. I've got nowhere to go because there's no berm. There's like briars and brambles and stuff everywhere. I make sure, and runners and walkers, it's recommended you do this. Make sure you're making eye contact with that driver, and it's not a threat. It's not to challenge them. It's to make sure that you can confirm through their eye contact that they do see you. There's so many times I can see they don't see me because, like the neighbor that almost killed me last year on a mountain bike, when she was on the wrong side of the road, they're on the proper ride, they're on their side of the road, but they never even know they almost hit me with their mirror, or I have to jump into the briars because they're on their phones. But there's a couple people in particular, this is why I stopped during rush hour particularly, who will just make eye contact with me, and the look on their face says, I am so miserable, I hate my life. And I know some of them is a situation of adult children living with them. Some of them, their grandchildren with them. Adult kids aren't working, so they're out there wanting to retire, but they have to go to work every day to take care of their adult children and their grandchildren. Some of them, I know, I'm not saying any names, but I know who you are, who almost kill me every day. They're so miserable, even though nothing's coming, they won't move over 6 inches. And I've often thought, are they trying to hit me with their mirror? So I just stopped during rush hour. In the summer, I start an hour earlier, which is okay because, you know, 5:30, 6 a.m. It's too hot to run by 8 a.m. anyway. And then this time of year, going into winter, I just start an hour later. I wait until 8 a.m. The temperature is usually risen by 10 degrees by then anyway, which makes it a more comfortable run. But all these lunatics are off the road. So my point of this today, the one that almost killed me today, she always does 60 miles an hour in our 45-hour zone. I have seen the police chasing her down. She obviously doesn't care. But here's what gets me. Not only is she a runner and a cyclist and a paddleboarder, you would think she would maybe give a little bit because she knows what it's like to almost be carved down out there just trying to get a workout in. But not just that, she's got a teenage son who runs out here. Sometimes I'll see him if I'm running or if I'm mountain biking. You know, hey, what's up? Have a good run. You would think, just out of concern that she wouldn't want people almost killing her teenage son with vehicles, she would stop driving like a lunatic so that she doesn't kill a runner someday with her vehicle. But how do you solve that problem? Like I said, I have seen the police chase her home because of her reckless driving, only to see her out the next day going 60 or 65 and 45, scrolling on her phone, being on the wrong side of the road. I don't have the answer, but my point to all this is that this is my concern with my wife driving on the road. It's a concern I have when she goes walking or jogging or cycling on the road, and certainly when our son's out there with us. I'm to the point to where I'm thinking I might just jump in the truck. A lot of the roads I run on around here are dirt roads. I might see one car. If I run 5 miles on these dirt roads, I might see one car. Most times I don't see any. But I'm to the point to where I'm about ready to just start driving, even though it's only a 1/4 of a mile that way and a 1/4 of a mile that way. I don't think it's worth losing my life in that 1/4 of a mile. It's deer. It's not a Bigfoot Sasquatch. It's like 40 of them. See them up there moving in the trees? Look at that. It's a giant deer herd. They're still coming. See, I'm sorry. So many distractions. I'll tell you, when you have ADHD or whatever I have, that's, you know, everybody's got to label it. They got to call it something. You know what I call it? A love of nature. It's why I live out here. You know, I thought by getting out of the city, I'd be getting out of the lunatics in their vehicles, but I guess not. But it's limited, but at least I got my deer. Gosh, they're still coming. I don't know if you can see them breaking the skyline up there. There might be 50 in this herd. In the winter, they yard up. It's called yarding up. They get together to search for food. They search for food in teams, large teams. So anyway, my concern is my wife's safety because of all the other lunatics on the road. It's great. Hey, great for her for being... Got to tell you this story. I'm probably going to lose more than 43 subscribers over this. About 2 years ago, I was hanging out with a group of friends, and there was this woman in the group who was in her mid to late 70s here in Charlottesville, and she had been in the hospital. She'd spent a night in the hospital, and I didn't know what was going on. I was like, oh, I hope she's okay. And somebody asked her if she's okay. She says, yeah, I'm fine. Somebody else asked her what happened. She said she'd gotten in a car accident, and she'd gotten hurt, not seriously, but she did have to be kept overnight for observation, probably because of her age. She was asked, what happened? And she says, well, I'm kind of having a problem with that, with what happened, because I told a little white lie, and I'm wondering if I should call the police and kind of confess to what really happened. Here's what happened. She goes off the side of a road in a turn, hits a telephone pole, and cuts the telephone pole in two. Well, of course, the ambulance comes, cops show up. She was hurt enough to where she had to go to the hospital, and she had to do a night in the hospital. They asked her, they said, ma'am, what happened? And she said, this is terrible. I don't really know. I'm almost 80, and I was driving down the road, and 1 minute everything's fine, and then the next minute my car's on its side, and I'd broken that telephone pole in half, and she goes, I think it's my age. And of course, they start babying her. Oh gosh, we're so sorry. They put their police report. Oh man, we are so sorry. We're going to make sure you get the best care. The ambulance is on the way, and blah 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 blah, and all that happened. Well, one of her friends said, well, what's the problem? What is this truth? People don't like the truth that you feel you might need to call the police and tell them about. And she goes, well, the truth is that's not what happened. The truth was I was scrolling on my Facebook, reading comments to my latest post while I was driving, and I went through the turn and went off the road and hit the telephone pole. Bingo! What if this guy would have been running there that day, or cycling, or anybody else? What if my wife, a new driver, is out there driving, and the person on the cell phone goes into the next lane and hits her head on? Well, I'll tell you what, if they do, their car better be bigger than a Dodge Ram 1500 2.5-ton pickup truck, or a Mercedes-Benz SUV that has a steel frame. All right, so what might those deer have been running from? Here's the part that's going to tick you off, all right? 43 of you have probably already left. Maybe you drive like the people I've described that have nearly killed me, and God knows how many other cyclists and walkers and runners and joggers. Maybe some of you can relate. You've been watching it. Now, the hypocrisy of you're a runner, your teenage son's a runner, but you're out here the biggest threat to runners, whatever. After my wife passed her test, I said, okay, I'm going to take you out to lunch, celebratory lunch. We always go out to lunch anyway. I'm like, when we're in town running errands, where do you want to eat? She goes, oh, I don't know. I don't care. I said, okay, I'm going to surprise you. My pick. I'm just going to take you somewhere, and that'll be your surprise. So in my mind, I was thinking of a particular business, and I'm going to name this business. You know why? Because they are doing it right, and the woman that runs it is a winner. This is the other woman I want to tell you about. Did something great. It's in Charlottesville. It's a place called the Burrito Barn. It's underneath the bridge that crosses over into Belmont, right at the end of the downtown mall where the Ping concert center amphitheater is, where they have the Fridays after 5. Just down there below that bridge by the tracks. It's in a tiny little house. It's called the Burrito Barn. Before COVID hit, we ate there. Excuse me. I just ate one of those burritos here a little bit ago. Going to go eat they're this big. They're like $10 each, but it's 2 meals, I'm telling you. We ate there. They opened up not long before COVID, okay? And it was the best burrito in town. And there's a lot of, Charlottesville's #2 per capita in the United States for most restaurants in its city, second only behind Atlanta. You can walk down a 100-yard street if you're in Charlottesville and pass 15 restaurants. Some of them are good. The Burrito Barn was excellent. Then we went into COVID, restaurants shut down, all this stuff. And we started seeing a lot of restaurants not opening back up, a lot of other small businesses, because they didn't have the capital. They hadn't really been in business long enough and been successful long enough to kind of build a name for themselves. They disappeared. So we would talk about going to the Burrito Barn for one of those delicious burritos off and on. During COVID, once the restaurants did open back up and you were allowed, they had outside dining, or when you were allowed to go in, but you had to keep your mask on. You know, the protocol was always changing. And we just kind of assumed, well, it's not going to be there. There's no way that little place made it through COVID. It's a single owner, appears to be a single owner, a very pleasant woman in her mid to late 60s. And I bet she is so pleasant, I bet she's a safe driver. I'd be willing to place that bet, and I'm not a gambler. But she's a very pleasant woman in her I'd say, mid to late 60s. Running the shop by herself. When we first went in there, she didn't even have any employees. She was doing it all, but it was a small place in a small neighborhood surrounded by a lot of competition. We thought, she just didn't make it. There's no way. So today, because we've talked about it, my mouth's watering thinking about it. We've talked about it off and on so much. In my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to drive by the Burrito Barn. If it's closed, big deal. I'll just go somewhere else. There's another place down that way I like. We go there, and sure enough, it's open. Dearly was excited because she loved it so much. She hadn't been there, since COVID started. We go in there. Place is packed. The lady now had tables for outside dining. They were packed. Go in, it's packed inside. She had 2 employees. She was still doing the cooking, which is a good thing because she's an excellent cook. She's the one that makes these tasty burritos, and they got some tacos and some other things. She made it. She survived through COVID. While so much of that competition around her, competition that was more established, did have a name for themselves, a good name for themselves in town, I'd be willing to bet probably had more capital than her, didn't make it, and that's unfortunate, and I wish they had, but somehow she did. So Dearly and I order our burritos. We're outside because it was 60 degrees today in Charlottesville, even though it's the middle of December. They say Virginia's for lovers. I say, yeah, people who love nice weather in the winter. That's so anyway, we're out there. Well, the lady brings us our burritos, and it wasn't one of her 2 employees. It was her, the woman that cooked them, the woman that owned the place. She came, gave us burritos, and I said, I am so glad to see that you made it through COVID. You made it through the pandemic. You're still open because you have the best burritos in town. We haven't been here in a while, but I'm so happy for you to see that you made it. And she goes, well, what choice did I have? And I asked her, I said, what do you mean, what choice did you have? She goes, well, what choice did I have? She goes, it was either stay in business, figure out how to stay in business even when I had to close, or lose my investment. Be out of business, I would lose every dollar I sunk into this place. So what choice did I have? I said, ma'am, you had the choice to fail. You could have made the choice to not make it. And that's the choice so many people, most people, 66% of people who are in business for themselves make despite pandemics. Even when there is no pandemic, 2 out of 3 small business owners fail in the first year. And then 2 out of 3 of those that make it fail in the next 4 years. So something like 7 out of 8 people, 5 out of 6 people that go into business for themselves don't make it to the 5-year mark. I said, ma'am, you made it through the worst pandemic in modern history. You deserve to give yourself some credit. Here's another reason why she probably made it. She didn't see it that way because she obviously also understands humility. And so I said to her, I said, ma'am, you made it because you're a winner and you've got a winner's mindset. She goes, woohoo! She says, thanks for coming, guys. Enjoy your burritos. And she goes back inside to keep doing what she figured out to do to be successful during a time when most people couldn't. A lot of people don't want to hear that because a lot of people have loser mentalities, and 43 of you will leave because of that. For those of you who are still here, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.